carried the tiny shroud. We all hurried to the room where my wife was waiting for me. So everything was going as she wanted. The sight of her serene little face gave me peace of mind. I hadn't felt for the past 2 days. For a few more moments, I stared at her in the pale neon light. Then they hurriedly covered her face again. My wife's elder brother was waiting for us outside the door, standing there straight as the Sphinx, forlorn as a disused well. He may have been praying silently, only appropriate. I asked him to wait just a moment longer while I checked on her. Then we put the shroud into a basket I'd bought from a flower seller nearby and covered it with roses. It looked like a tiny garden that had come instantly to full bloom. It was the very end of spring. So yes, it's sad. I'm sorry about that. But unfortunately, this is my only novel translated in English. Later in the novel, it becomes a little bit lighter because I give voice also to the son, who's 4 years old and who's in love for the first time. And then I give voice to some friends and so on. So the narrator is not just hijacking the whole narration, she's also participating a little bit with others in trying to understand what happened. What happened to her was not even a medical mistake or any of that. And I remained very, very friend with my gynecologist actually up till today. Never blamed him for anything. What happened was unfortunate. But at the same time, I didn't want everyone to read the novel as if this is 100% me. So what I did is that throughout the novel, I kept talking about different forms of loss that did not happen to me, but might have happened to this character. So she would lose her job, for example, at one point, or she would sell the family house, and those events are not real. This is why I'm calling Dunya Zaid an autofiction. It's not really an autobiography, it's an autofiction because there is, part of it is real, the very first chapter, for example, but then the rest is kind of invented and fictional. And yeah, and the son who's at the end of the novel is born, or is on his way to be born. His name is Ziad and he's 20 years old now.
Yeah, good evening. My book is called Beirut Cultural Shock, a Canadian Tale. I look at it as Canadian literature, but my experience with publishers in Toronto is that mostly they are not ready with the literature that deviates from their template of what they think is Canadian literature. And I was appealing to them that it's a diverse country, there's multiculturalism, people come with different experiences, etc. To the extent that some of them who claim to be on literary committees with publishing houses, even big ones in Toronto, they don't know about literary techniques. I was telling them that being of Lebanese origin, we have this idea of sometimes going into fantasy, you know, like what you see in Latin American literature, like Garcia Marquez. And also I said, do you appreciate that in German literature there's this concept of Doppelganger? So that, you know, if you want to keep the main character in the novel admired by the reader, you have some evil person do what the main character wanted to do. So you save them from, you know, being hated by the readers. So those kinds of debates were going back and forth. But anyway, so the book is here, and it reflects a new wave of literary kind. And I chose for tonight to read the last chapter, which reflects this kind of fantasy. Usually in Arabic literature, there is some kind of Sufi inclination. My colleagues, Maya and Kais, know about this. So, so the last chapter is called Night Flight to the East. Anyway, the cover is by my daughter, You can come and see it later. It's a big painting we have at home. And Catherine is now working at Radio Canada in Montreal. Hello? Yeah. So Night Flight to the East, the chapters are 3 to 5 pages.
Maybe use the other microphone.
Yes, you can. Turn it off though, so you don't have echo.
Yeah, the chapters are 3 to 5 pages long, but the last chapter is 3 pages. And on purpose, for every chapter, I picked the little line from Hotel California of the Eagles, because it does really reflect the theme or the idea of the book. So for this chapter, I picked those 2 lines. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. At the highest point east of St. John's, Newfoundland, I was alone, and I sat still for several minutes as the wind slapped my face and hit the bald hill peak with ferocity. Suddenly, I felt a shudder of cold hitting my body and a sense of desolation in my soul. The cold and the sense of loss led me to a feeling of disintegration and powerlessness, as if I was dying. A moment of illumination followed. Tonight, I will take a flight back to the east with invisible wings. If Marconi sent signals from this point 100 years earlier, I should be able to send my soul to the other side of the oceanic divide. I lay on my back now, cold as ice on the rock, gazing at the sky. I could see my soul leaving my body and having its own wings, flying away. I could see a large eagle leaving its nest in the rocks and flying in tandem next to my soul high in the sky. My soul then turns from where it reaches high above and sees my body that now looks like a small mosquito on a rock next to the ravine that descended to the ocean. Then, as if my soul has developed a life of its own, it accelerates flight and heads east over the North Atlantic. My soul flies south towards Latin America, observing mountains and coasts and watching the black waters of the ocean, where mythical creatures and sea monsters, drawn by cartographers of medieval maps, supposedly live. Then my soul flies back northeast, reaches North Africa, and hovers over Algiers and Carthage. Then crosses to the northern shores of the Mediterranean Sea, flying over the island of Corfu and the Balkans. While, with another jump in the sky, my soul speeds towards the Levant and the mountain range of the Lebanon, the country where I was born. Looking at the vast Lebanon mountain range below, I now feel insignificant, a mere creature glued to the top of the sky. Looking down at my ancient land, I start crying. Warm teardrops come down my cheeks. I cry for Lebanon, for my life 10,000 kilometers away, for my agonies. Over the decades, I cried so many times for failing to find a bridge that would bring me back to an earlier life, to a place where I was before, with familiar faces, sounds and things, but the place is no more. I, the Canadian of Lebanese origin, see my country of birth as folklore, a whim of nostalgia. I listen to its music and songs. I watch its movies and read its literature. I've been visiting it since 1996. Is it still under my skin, and do I belong there? My generation that witnessed the first years of civil war was thrown away to the unknown, to distant continents. I am Travis in the movie Paris, Texas, who wanders in the deserts of Texas looking for something but didn't know what. Decades ago, when I first took the plane, I looked outside the window and saw tiny villages of this beautiful land getting smaller as I flew away. and I saw the topography of the Levant, extending from Iskenderun in the north to Gaza in the south. This land appears as one continuous country when seen from the air, but colonialism and ongoing conflicts has left it a mess of a map. One day in the distant future, there would be no more people around to fight over this land. It will return to its virgin state and would observe the 4 seasons with monotony. Tree leaves fall down, butterflies die. Dead leaves are reborn, and butterflies break away their cocoons and fly again. Life springing from death. Renewed spirits rise from decaying elements of nature. In a big life, a cycle of life that goes back to earlier times, even earlier than the Old Testament. On these aging rocks of the Levant, horses marched over the millennia, sailors arrived by boats, invading tanks descended, and militiamen fought over turf. Luxury cars of warlords and merchants passed by. Processions gathered for weddings and funerals. Military checkpoints erected, and travelers walked. However, these rocks have hardly changed by all this history. From Adonis and Astarte in Phoenician legend to Salah ad-Din, Richard the Lionheart, Napoleon Bonaparte, these eternal rocks have seen all. They are all gone now, and it is said that humanity itself would end someday in the future. Rocks alone would remain as it was before, and sea waves will hit them in sequences of ebb and flow, just as they did 1,000,000 years ago. With the same speed and agility, my soul flies back to Canada, to the hill above St. John's, where my body lay dead, like a mosquito frozen here millions of years ago. For a minute, I see my soul descending back to earth at very high speed, fluttering its wings to hit me like a storm. My soul joins my body so quickly that it feels like an electric shock, and I wake up and feel alive again. Now I can only hear howling wind all over the place, as dark as has fallen over the city. I walk down the hills in the freezing cold, and I feel fragile. I need food, water, and oxygen. I need shelter from the elements of nature. Then I die, disintegrate, and become dust blown in the wind. I am Canada. I need to go back to the east, to the cradle of civilization, where Jesus was born, where he walked the hills of Lebanon to give glory to all the Levant. Nevertheless, here I am, by a pond, dying one cell at a time.
Okay, so what we'll do then, now, I'll ask questions of my 2 co-authors, and they'll do the same to the others. And so let me start with you, since you were just reading that. I found, because of the different cultural background that I grew up in as a child, up to kind of teenage, I found that when I was writing the story, I had a little bit of conflict, in the sense that there were things that I wanted to expose very much, with the idea being to expose them in order that we could improve them, if possible. But at the same time, I knew that the book, even though it's written in English, it will be read by many educated people from my own country, who are either immigrants here in Canada or in the United States or in the UK, wherever. And they, many of them speak very fluent English and so on. And would they be actually offended by some of the things that I say? Because although they may be true, but I mean, they don't really want your dirty linen in public, to be exposed in public. And so I struggled with that. And I wanted to ask Kemal about that as well, because, for example, in your book, I dealt with sexual scenes very openly and very frankly. In fact, last week I was with a group of feminists and they told me that my scenes were too graphic, some of them in my book. But Kamal, in your book here on page 159, you were talking about extramarital relations. And this is what you say: extramarital relations did take place, even in remote conservative villages, whether Muslim or Christian. This was one reason why marriage broke down. Some cheating would go on for several years, but due to the economic conditions in a society where men are the main breadwinners, some women accepted their husbands cheating, fearing divorce or separation, and subsequently the specter of economic hardship. And you referred to something very important, which I also mentioned in one of my other novels, not this one. Many parents usually sent their daughters back to their husbands and even sided with the abusive man without trying to get him to correct his ways and stop the cheating or the abuse. They were interested only in avoiding the expenses of looking after their daughters once again. Are you happy to talk about that, or is there a problem?
Sure, of course.
I wrote a lot more than that.
Actually, this book was not welcomed by a lot of people in Lebanon because supposedly Lebanon or the Lebanese consider themselves as one of the foremost westernized of the Arab countries. But then a lot of things, like you remove the veneer of the buttocks and face surgery and modern homes and all that stuff, there is a lot of backwardness going on. It's a country where civil registry is still done by religious courts, where reading horoscope is the main feature on TV on New Year's Eve, etc. So to talk openly about that, like, hit people in Lebanon when they read the book in a negative way. But so what? The treatment of the worst of diseases is painful and it's not easy. I could relate to this to my Canadian upbringing, to speak openly about things and bring the disease out and try to cure it. That's why the chapters are flashes between Canada and Lebanon, events about people and speaking openly about things and what's wrong with Lebanon and how it could be better, because this way it sounds like a nightmare that has been going on for 100 years, claiming modernity, yet living in a situation where day-to-day life becomes like a survival thing. So in the book I even wrote a lot more than that. For example, at universities in Lebanon, it happened that kids who are very open about using condoms and about having sex before marriage are at the same time the most observant of religious practices. So go figure. And things like that. Like, you try to look at with the critical eyes rather than what the readers expected from this book. Oh, here's an expatriate who's visiting Lebanon and he will say, how lovely are the mountains, how tasty is the food, etc. And it wasn't that.
Good, thank you. All right, Sig, I also have a question for you, May. It's on page 87 of your book. In the middle paragraph you say, I'm not giving my husband a name either. He has gentle eyes, a face with protruding cheeks like statues of ancient gods, and a fine body. Sometimes we quarrel, but only rarely does he raise his voice. A few weeks ago, when he left the house because I ... he came home and scolded me in French. I burst into tears. I loved him and didn't blame him. After all, he's also Dunyazad's and Shihabuddin's father. Can you explain the ... and why you didn't?
very convenient. What it's, you know, like you have the dots, use them. Okay, no, it's a literary device.
We don't use dots. We don't use dots.
No, there is a scene where when they make love in order to make another baby, where it's not graphic, but you know, imagine this is a mother who just lost her daughter. So of course, sexuality is not an issue here. No, truly, because it's auto-fictional, and because we have audiences who are very voyeuristic in the Middle East and in the Arab world and in Arabic literature in general, sometimes you do some auto-censorship, and this I do. I did in my first novel. I promise you in the third it's the total opposite, so let's wait until it is translated now into French, but not in English. And it's called a cappella. You mentioned a cappella when you did the presentation case. So, yes, so there is even scenes where extramarital relationships take place, or people who are married to cheating will take place, and so on, in a cappella. So by a cappella, I was more courageous, let's say. The first novel, it was a little bit ... But in this particular paragraph, I remember that I didn't want, a few weeks ago, when he left the house because and I honestly, like I can swear on any holy book right now, I don't remember what I did. But I wanted to convey this moment where the husband is just, he can't take it anymore, and he will find an excuse to say, I slammed the door, I leave this house, you're the reason because you did something. And the wives, sometimes they don't remember, what did I do? Did I really, when does it come from? And then, you know, so maybe this is what I had in mind, rather than saying that I did something wrong and I didn't want to say what it was. But yeah, I thought, and then also because this novel was written at the beginning of a movement of literary renewal, let's say in Egypt. We call this group of writers, and I'm part of this group, the 90s generation. The book was published in 1997. And this is my second book. The first was a short stories collection. We wanted actually to challenge a little bit some of the assumptions imposed by what we call la littérature engagée, and the committed sort of literature, committed to showing the problems in society and showing the political dimension and so on. And we wanted to write something more intimate and to keep those gaps. Not to give all answers to your reader, not to explain everything to the reader, but let the reader guess and get puzzled and so on. So I changed a lot in this novel in particular, the linearity of the narrative. I don't tell the story from A to Z. I go back and I do some flash forward and some flashback, and I keep those dots sometimes, and so I was playing those games because it was back then shocking and new to in our generation of writers, and then now we've become kind of classic because some new generations came after our generation and started writing the same way. But honestly speaking, the dots, it might be something that I wanted to hide, and I don't remember it now, and it might be a literary device actually to make the question mark hanging over our heads. What's happening here? Because she did what? Why didn't you say?
Keep the microphone and ask.
Yeah, so I'm asking. It's my turn now
yes.
to ask Kamel.
Kamal or and
you.
Or both.
Or both. So I was, when I was reading both books and I read them in separate moments, I was thinking, because I teach also a course on Arab Canadian literature and contribution to literature and arts in Canada and so on, I was thinking this is an exemplification of diasporic writing, migrant writing, and so on, migrant literature, and so on, in two completely different ways. So my question for Kamel is that when you start writing this book and the first couple of chapters, you're talking about Beirut being your little America, and I love this idea of Little America, similar to Little Italy or to Chinatown maybe, and so on. And you had this feeling that, or you gave the feeling to your reader that you're not satisfied with this environment, and you wanted to leave at any price, and the war started and so on, so this was totally explained. But then throughout the book, we feel like there is some sort of reconciliation that happened with the homeland. So as a diasporic writer, what we see in diasporic writing most of the time is the mythology of the homeland and the idea of return, and we should, because the mountains and the picturesque and the food and so on. There is this nostalgia, but you kind of depart a little bit from this nostalgia from the very beginning of your book, saying that you were raised in Little America in Beirut. How the reconciliation happened over the years, because this is kind of subtle in the book, and we cannot understand. You read the end of the book. We cannot understand how over the years your reconciliation with the homeland occurred.
Thank you, man. This is really a complex question. Actually, it demonstrates how the ability of Professor May to really pinpoint the thesis of the book, of the story. I would say that I'm like her. I'm passionate about cinema, world cinema, American cinema, European, whatever. And that I wrote the book with an idea that I wanted to read like a movie, so that I take the hand of the reader and walk with them throughout the pages. About this particular thing, very few people know that the West, France in particular, tried to make Beirut another Paris of the East. But then the remainder of the country remained isolated and backward, especially the eastern parts of the country. Like, some of the mountains of Yemen. So there are tribes in Lebanon. And just last week, a man was kidnapped and sent shockwaves throughout the country by tribal leaders in East Lebanon. So in Beirut, which is like Paris or a modern European city, this really outlandish, something from different. So I was raised in that kind of place where you feel like amongst Americans and French and German people and English people, and the school was like that. The teachers in school, they insist that we speak French and that Arabic is no, and that we only listen to American and European pop and watch European movies, etc. So in a way, yes, I was born and raised in Beirut up to a certain point, because I left Lebanon at age 16. But all this period, I was somehow cut off from what is really Lebanon, what is the Arab world, what is this, what is that. So when the civil war started in Lebanon in 1975, that's when the idea hit that somehow the people in Beirut are enjoying themselves like a Western oasis, but forgetting that Beirut is already surrounded by a poverty belt of country people coming from the poor provinces to enjoy what the city had to offer. And it's really the suburbs who jumped on the city and ate it up, and the country was engulfed in war. And I spent a few years in Lebanon with my family, with my parents, and we are a small Christian family in the western part of the city, which was largely Muslim. But we didn't have any problem with that, aside from Western media trying to portray what was happening as Christian, Muslim, etc. But that was not the case at all, at least in the first few years of the war. So we came to Canada, and in Canada, I was very angry. How did you destroy my little America, as May was suggesting, and how I was cut off from my childhood, from all those years where I was growing up and feeling great about myself and going to school, and one day I will go to the university and this and that. Until the early 90s, when I met someone in Ottawa. She was American born, and she was telling me that she was born in the States, but the first thing she did when she visited Egypt is to buy a 40 CD box set of Kulthum. she's like a diva of Arab tongue. Why would you do that? Like, I hated all these things. She said, well, you know, it's like it grows on you. It's like, you know, it's like a drug. It's like, you will try it, and then you will find out. So I start, in the 90s, I start buying tapes and listening to music and watching Lebanese movies and Egyptian movies. By the way, when we say Arab movie, it's essentially from Egypt, because Egypt is the Hollywood of the Arabs. And I thought that there's something wonderful here, like in this culture, and it's my ancestors, and to answer your question, it's where I was born, I should be proud about it. And I look around me, like the Irish from Peterborough and Kingston and other places, very proud of their culture, and and the Green and all Ireland and the English and the French and the Aboriginal peoples, despite suffering 500 years, they still maintain their identity and they did not disappear. Why should I claim to be something else, to be French or to be this or to be that? I also have to. And my work in the government, I worked in the government for 25 years and I reached very high positions. By the time I quit, I was a director, but I thought that I want to write books and with May's help to teach at the university and do things that I like. I suffered very sharp drop in salary, but that was fine as long as I follow my passion. My experience in government, some of my colleagues who are almost retiring were saying, oh, you are of Lebanese background, why you don't have a restaurant? So it was this, well, I'm your director, I'm your boss now, and we're doing scientific research, and I'm spending $2 million of government money to do research and this and that. So these are some of the steps of my experience that no matter how you take it, Canada encourages you to, you know, to feel that you're happy with your origin and your roots. And sorry to make a long answer.
I'll ask you a question, Case. Forbidden Love in the Land of Shiva, I love the title. And I find this book absolutely feminist. There is a plot, yeah, there is a very intriguing and interesting, once you start reading, you don't want to stop. A love story between a married woman and the major protagonist, who's a surgeon, Farouk, in the novel. And then it's she who will make the first steps. She is the one who is going to seduce him and then, you know, attract him to her and so on. And I find this very, very feminist in a way. Like the woman has agency in the novel, and agency is key to understand what's happening until they leave the country together. And she's pregnant, by the way. So my question to you would be about feminism, being a feminist as a Yemeni, Canadian. I mean, I've never seen, he's one of a kind, right? I've never seen a Yemeni feminist in my entire life. So I was wondering if this is something that grew on you because of Canada, or you've been a feminist since your first years in Yemen.
Yeah, it is an oxymoron, isn't it? Yeah, to be feminist and a Yemeni. Well, we have a Yemeni doctor here as well, who also knows how I feel about this issue. Yes, very much so. I actually have been extremely active in this field in a serious way, because I'm part of the Ottawa Peace Festival, which has been going on for the past 8 to 9 years, and I'm actually one of the co-directors. And every year we have, each one of us holds a discussion group, and I've chosen every year to have a panel discussion about gender equality. And we hold this, I usually hold it at City Hall. I pay for it out of my own pocket because I feel so passionate about it. So I hope that answers your question. But I think it's becoming much more common now amongst the younger and more educated males of Yemeni origin. Not only those who are abroad like me, but also even in Yemen. And if given half a chance, I think the majority of them will become like that. But it's very difficult to act against society and be kind of a pariah. It's very difficult.
Can I interject here?
Use the microphone.
Should I? Hello, maybe I should stand. My name is Najat Safsani, so I just feel compelled to speak to this point about being Yemeni and being feminist. I must say, just like Yemen's war now is the forgotten war. Yemen has always been the forgotten country, internationally or even within the Arab world itself. So its position, poverty next to very rich, powerful neighbors, of course, these are all factors. But back to the point of feminists, there is, many Yemeni feminists. My father was one of them. There is actually a great group of human rights activists, women, who are out there, and they're the ones who are carrying the load of humanitarian work in Yemen. Many men lost their, prominent men, they lost their credibility in the society. These women, by the way, most of them, the vast majority of them, were raised by feminist men. One must be honest and say, just like myself, in order to be able to be educated and to have a voice, you must have a supportive father to say, no, she's going to school, no, she's going to university, no, she will work, she's not going to cover her face, and she will have a voice. So for many women like myself, they all had feminist fathers, brothers, husbands. But again, the forgotten country doesn't get that much coverage, and I think there are many misconceptions out there, so I hope at least this one gets corrected.
Well, your turn. Ask questions if you wish.
Okay, ladies first. If you recall from the novels of Najib Mahfouz, the Egyptian novelist who won the Nobel Prize, one of his techniques is to have long exposures of the hitta, of the Egyptian neighborhood, so that, when we read his novels, maybe a few events and few episodes where people actually are talking, but 50 pages just describing the cafe shop and the street and the woman and this and that and the children and all that. So in that sense, that's the Nobel Committee, they described that. In your novel, how is this semi-autobiographical is also a reflection of Egypt, or the condition of Egypt?
So Najib Mahfouz, for those of you who might not have seen one of his books will look like this. The three of our books. 1,000 pages. Yeah. So, and when you look at Dunya Zad, you barely think this is a novel. It's slim, it's too tiny, and so in my opinion, you're totally right about describing the neighborhood and so on for 100 pages. He's very fond of Émile Zola and of Marcel Proust and all those famous writers and so on. So the sentence will be 20 lines and then the description will be 50 pages and so on. I am not this generation, and I stopped reading Najib Mahfouz for a while now. I was reading him when I was 14, 15, 16, and then you can read him as much as I have a lot of respect for his work. You can read him on a train trip for 3 or 4 hours and you enjoy it. But I kind of don't relate to this type of literature. I prefer to be concise, I prefer to give some emotional shocks, I prefer to be remembered by telling the story of a mother who lost her daughter, and then how she will cope with the loss and how she will make another child. And it's a tiny little story, and I'm not overgeneralizing. I'm not saying all mothers would feel this way. And I'm not speaking in the name of Egyptian women. Never ever. I come from a cosmopolitan neighborhood called Heliopolis, and my second novel's title is Heliopolis. I started learning French at the age of 4 in a French school, so I'm the privileged, right? Who went to this French school. We're a tiny little minority in Egypt who are Francophone. We're less than 1 million in a country where you have 92 million people living. So as a Francophone, I felt also like the minority of the minority of the minority. In literature, I feel the same thing. keep thinking that, you know, I am not going to represent others through my literature. I represent my own voice, my own experience, what I saw, where I lived, and I can convey this the best I could, using new devices if I can. Changing voices, overlapping voices are something that I really I am fond of in my work in general. So I wrote 3 novels and 3 short stories collection, and most of them will have this multiplicity of voices. So it's kind of, you know, it's a portrayal not of Egypt as such, but of an Egyptian moment. It's the moment where we try to free ourselves as a generation from the oppression of older generations who wanted literature to be this way. Why don't you write like Najib Mahfouz? You know, this is literally what we were told when you go to any coffee shop and you have those friends sitting around and we're debating about literature and how literature should be new and renewable and so on. Everyone would tell you, you know, Najib Mahfouz is the biggest value, right? But there are hundreds of other writers, unforgotten voices as well, who are not translated, who did not get Nobel Prize, and who had a huge impact on my way of seeing literature and enjoying literature and appreciating literature. So he's not like the major point de repère.
The yardstick?
Yeah. He's not anymore. I mean, for our generation. And I'm 51, by the way, so I'm not a young generation. Look at the even younger generations than ours, and you will see that they completely go against those taboos, such as you have to portray the life in the neighborhood, in the popular neighborhood, and the poverty, and this and that. So how about a mother who lost her child? I want to tell this story. Can I, please? And then when I told it, I was awarded, and it was very, very well received in Egypt. This I have to say as well. So I don't feel like I've been discriminated against in any way. I was recognized as a writer, and this is another privilege as well.
One more, and then we'll open it up.
Question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, very quick question. In your story, a love story, but at the same time, the Yemeni context, to what extent could you say the impact of Farouk, who went to Scotland, and his generation, and Yemenis who study in Europe and America, have on Yemen when they return? Like, because the way you describe it, as if they also submit to the values and the conservative climate of the country, and they agree to whatever is going on. Why they are not contributing towards more modernization or westernization of the country? And why Hannah would submit to this also?
It's a very good practical question. Actually, the reason I think is it's a question of numbers, really. Yemen has a population of 30 million, and the number of people who manage to find scholarships to go and study in Europe and the United States and the Western world, and also Eastern Europe, hundreds of them went there as well. It's so small compared to the rest of the population that it's like a drop in the ocean in a way. At the same time, the level of education is so low. I mean, there are so many people are just never go to school. They are totally illiterate. They don't have the opportunity, especially outside the big cities. So you try to make an impact. You try to advocate change, but most of the time you get silenced by the huge numbers of people who do not subscribe to your opinions, and you get attacked as being either a Westerner. That's the mild attack. But if you really want to be attacked, you are become an infidel. And then once you are an infidel, you can lose your head. That's not, and you can't really preach without your head. So, so it's difficult, very difficult. But I think as the numbers increase, a lot of people will become not just more brave. I think there's no shortage of bravery. It's just a question of how effective are you going to be if you are only one iota in that big sea of lack of education and extremist values, Islamism, and so on. So it's not easy. So